You know what they say about family, blood is thicker than water. Well, I'm Margaret Thompson, I'm 62 years old, and I just discovered that sometimes blood can be poisonous too. Let me tell you about the day my 12-year-old grandson handed me a red envelope that changed everything I thought I knew about the people I'd spent my entire life supporting. This story isn't just about betrayal, it's about 30 years of building an empire while being treated like a convenient ATM, and what happens when the ATM finally fights back. But first, let me tell you who I really am, because that's where this story actually begins. My name is Margaret Elizabeth Thompson, and for the past 40 years, I've been living a carefully constructed lie. Not a malicious lie, but a protective one. You see, while my family thought I was just a retired bookkeeper living on my dead husband's pension, scraping by on Social Security and the occasional consulting job, the truth was far different. I built Thompson Financial Consulting from nothing. Started in 1985 in my kitchen, while my husband Robert worked his factory job and my sons were in elementary school. Back then, women weren't supposed to understand money, we were supposed to balance checkbooks and clip coupons while our husbands made the real financial decisions. But I had a gift for numbers, for seeing patterns in markets, for understanding risk in ways that most people couldn't grasp. My first client was my neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, who needed help organizing her late husband's estate. Then it was her sister, then her friend from church. Word spread quietly through networks of widows and divorced women who needed financial guidance but couldn't afford the fancy downtown firms that charged $500 an hour just to explain their own investment portfolios. By 1990, I was managing $2 million in client assets for my home office. By 1995, it was $15 million. By 2000, I had hired 3 employees and moved into a real office building. By 2010, Thompson Financial Consulting was managing over $100 million in assets and had 12 employees. 3 years ago, I sold the company to a larger firm for $22 million. My family had no idea. To them, I was just mom, just grandma, just the woman who somehow always had money when they needed it but lived modestly enough that they never questioned where it came from. When they asked how I could afford to pay for Emma's college tuition, I told them Robert's life insurance was more generous than expected. When Richard needed $50,000 for his business startup, I said I'd taken out a loan against the house. When Lisa needed a new car after David died, I explained that I'd cashed in some old savings bonds. They believed every lie because they wanted to believe them. It was easier to accept my generosity if they thought it came from lucky circumstances, rather than admitting their mother and grandmother was more financially successful than any of them could ever dream of being. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you about Emma's wedding day, because that's when everything changed. It was June 15th, a perfect Saturday morning with the kind of crystal-clear sky that photographers pray for. Emma, my 26-year-old granddaughter, was marrying Bradley Matthews, a nice boy she'd met in college. Brad worked as an engineer at Boeing, made decent money, treated Emma well, and had the kind of steady character that reminded me of my late husband. The wedding was at St. Mary's Cathedral, the same church where I'd married Robert 38 years earlier, where I'd baptized my sons, where I'd said goodbye to Robert 8 years ago, and where I'd buried my younger son David 5 years back. Some families measure their history in photo albums. Mine was measured in the pews of St. Mary's. Emma looked radiant in her wedding dress, a $3,000 creation of silk and lace that had required 3 fittings to get perfect. I know the exact cost because I paid for it, just like I'd paid for the flowers, the reception venue, the photographer, the band, and the honeymoon to Italy that they thought was a gift from Brad's parents. $43,000, total. Not that anyone asked what I could afford. They just assumed, like they always did, that somehow Grandma Margaret would make it all possible. I sat in the front pew wearing my best navy dress, the same one I'd worn to Robert's funeral, though nobody mentioned that detail except Patricia later, when she was building her case for my declining memory. My son Richard walked Emma down the aisle, since her father wasn't there to do it. David had died in a car accident when Emma was 21, leaving behind his wife Lisa and their 2 children, Emma and Tommy. David's death had been devastating for everyone, but especially financially devastating for Lisa, who'd never worked because David had convinced her that his artistic pursuits would eventually pay off. David had been a dreamer, a painter who talked about gallery showings that never materialized and art sales that never happened. For 15 years, I'd quietly subsidized their lifestyle while David chased his artistic vision and Lisa supported his dreams. After the funeral, which cost me $28,000, Lisa and the kids had nowhere to go. Their apartment was rented, they had no savings, and Lisa had no job skills beyond a high school diploma and 20 years of being a supportive wife to an impractical husband. So I stepped in. I found them a house, told Lisa the mortgage payments were covered by David's life insurance. I made sure there was money for groceries, utilities, car payments, and everything else two teenagers needed. Over 5 years, I'd given Lisa over $200,000, all while she believed it came from various insurance policies and David's secret savings account. Lisa never questioned the math because she didn't want to. It was easier to believe David had been more responsible than he'd appeared than to acknowledge that her mother-in-law was supporting her entire family. But I'm still getting ahead of myself. Back to the wedding. The ceremony was beautiful. Father McKenna, who'd been at St. Mary's for 25 years, performed the service with a kind of warmth that made even the most cynical guests tear up a little. Emma's vows were heartfelt, Brad's were steady and sincere, and when they kissed, the whole congregation erupted in applause. During the recessional, as the wedding party walked back down the aisle, I caught sight of my family scattered throughout the church. Richard and his wife Patricia sat 3 rows behind me, both dressed expensively, Patricia in a dress that cost more than most people's monthly rent, Richard in a suit that I'd helped pay for when his marketing company was going through a rough patch last year. Lisa sat with Jennifer and Tommy. Lisa looked elegant in a black dress that flattered her figure, the dress we'd gone shopping for together 2 weeks earlier, though she believed the $300 came from her emergency fund, rather than from a grandmother who wanted her to feel confident and beautiful at her daughter's wedding. Jennifer, 24 and fresh from graduate school, was taking photos with her phone, probably already planning her social media posts about her sister's perfect day. Jennifer had majored in communications and minored in entitlement, graduating with $68,000 in student loans that I'd quietly paid off so she could start her career debt-free. She believed her good fortune came from a scholarship program that I'd heard about through work. Tommy, my 12-year-old grandson, sat quietly next to his mother, looking handsome in his little suit but somehow older than his years. Tommy had always been different from the rest of the family, more observant, more thoughtful, more aware of the undercurrents that adults thought children couldn't perceive. The reception was held at the Marriott Grand Ballroom, a venue that charged premium prices for premium service. The ballroom was decorated in Emma's favorite colors, soft pink and gold, with centerpieces that had cost $200 each. The band was a local group that specialized in wedding receptions and charged accordingly. The bar was open, the dinner was served on real china, and everything was exactly as Emma had dreamed it would be. I sat at the head table, positioned between Emma and Brad, watching my family celebrate. Everyone was in high spirits, laughing and dancing and toasting the happy couple. The photographer captured hundreds of moments, Emma dancing with Richard, Lisa crying happy tears, Jennifer and Tommy sharing cake, Patricia chatting with the other wives. It all looked so perfect, so loving, so much like the close-knit family that everyone believed we were. That's when Tommy appeared at my elbow. "Grandma Margaret," he whispered, his young voice serious in a way that immediately got my attention. "Check the red envelope by the cake table when nobody's looking." I glanced around the reception hall. The party was in full swing. Richard was holding court near the bar, probably telling stories about his latest business ventures while conveniently forgetting to mention how those ventures were funded. Patricia was mingling with the other wives, her $40,000 anniversary ring catching the light as she gestured. The ring I'd bought her last year because Richard's company was having cash flow issues. Lisa was at a table with some of David's old friends, laughing at some shared memory. Jennifer was on the dance floor with some college friends, young and carefree in the way that only comes from never having to worry about money because someone else always takes care of everything. Emma was dancing with her new husband, radiant with happiness, blissfully unaware that her perfect wedding had been funded by a grandmother who was apparently more successful than anyone in the family realized. "What red envelope, sweetheart?" I asked Tommy, but he'd already melted back into the crowd of 200 guests. I made my way toward the cake table, stopping to chat with guests and accept congratulations about Emma's beautiful wedding. Everyone commented on how elegant everything was, how perfect the flowers looked, how delicious the food was. Several people mentioned how generous it was of Richard and Patricia to pay for such an elaborate celebration. I didn't correct them. The wedding cake was a 3-tier masterpiece of vanilla and chocolate layers with buttercream frosting and fresh flowers. It looked like something from a fairy tale and had cost $800, a price that seemed ridiculous until you saw how happy it made Emma to have exactly the cake she'd dreamed of since she was a little girl. Behind the cake table, tucked between the gift table and a floral arrangement, was a small red envelope. Nothing fancy, just the kind you might use for Christmas money or a graduation gift. I palmed it quickly and headed toward the ladies' restroom, my heart beating faster for reasons I couldn't yet explain. The ladies' room at the Marriott Grand was decorated in marble and gold fixtures, the kind of opulent restroom that justified the venue's premium pricing. I locked myself in the largest stall and opened the envelope with trembling fingers. Inside were printed screenshots of text messages, several photographs, and a handwritten note from Tommy in his careful 12-year-old handwriting. "Grandma, I'm sorry you have to see this, but I thought you should know. They don't know I have Mom's old phone. Love, Tommy." The first screenshot was a group text between Richard and Patricia from 3 days earlier. "Richard, Morrison confirmed we can start competency proceedings right after the wedding. Everything's in place." Patricia, good. Dr. Hanson documented her memory issues during her last appointment. Cost me $500 to get him to note her confusion, but it's in her medical record now. Richard, perfect. Lisa talked to that real estate agent yesterday. House should appraise at $1.2 million minimum. Even after expenses, we're looking at $300K each. Patricia, what about the investment accounts? Johnson at First National says she has at least $4.2 million across multiple portfolios. Richard, Jesus, I had no idea Mom was sitting on that much money. All these years watching her live like she's barely scraping by. Patricia, living like she's poor while we beg for loans and gifts. Well, not for much longer. Once she's in Westfield Manor, we can liquidate everything and divide it properly. Richard, assuming the competency hearing goes smoothly. Patricia, it will. We have documentation from 3 different doctors now, plus all the incidents we've been recording. The lawyer says it's a slam dunk. My hands started shaking, but not from age or weakness. From pure, undiluted rage. The second screenshot was even worse, a conversation between Lisa and Jennifer from the week before. Lisa, Richard says the nursing home has a spot available in July. It's actually quite nice, private rooms, good activities program. Jennifer, are you sure this is legal? Grandma doesn't seem confused to me. Lisa, that's why we all need to document her episodes. Every time she repeats a story, forgets a name, or seems disoriented. Richard's already got 3 doctors to note concerns in her file. Jennifer, what about Emma and Tommy? They won't go along with this. Lisa, Emma's too busy with wedding planning to pay attention. And Tommy's just a kid, by the time he understands what's happening, it'll be done. Jennifer, I really need that apartment deposit money. When do we move forward? Lisa, right after the wedding. Richard says we should have her committed within 2 weeks. Then we can sell the house and liquidate her accounts. Jennifer, how much are we talking about? Lisa, over $1 million each, maybe more. Richard thinks she's been hiding money for years. The third screenshot showed a conversation between Patricia and someone named Dr. Hanson. Patricia, I need you to document some memory concerns for Margaret Thompson at her next appointment. Dr. Hanson, Patricia, I can't falsify medical records. That's fraud. Patricia, it's not fraud if there are legitimate concerns. She's 62 years old, living alone, managing her own finances. Shouldn't someone be looking out for her welfare? Dr. Hanson, what kind of concerns are we talking about? Patricia, confusion, memory lapses, repeating stories. I'll provide you with specific incidents to document. Dr. Hanson, this is highly irregular. Patricia, it's $500 for a 15-minute appointment. Cash. Dr. Hanson, fine. But I want it understood that I'm documenting your concerns, not making a diagnosis. Patricia, perfect. That's all we need. I sat in that marble bathroom stall reading evidence of my family's betrayal, and something fundamental shifted inside me. These weren't the tears of a hurt mother or disappointed grandmother. These were the tears of a woman who just discovered that the people she'd spent decades supporting, sacrificing for, and loving were planning to steal everything she'd worked for and lock her away in the process. But then I stopped crying and started thinking. Because here's what my loving family didn't know about their supposedly confused, vulnerable mother and grandmother. I hadn't built a multi-million-dollar business by being weak, naive, or easy to manipulate. I'd built it by being smarter, tougher, and more strategic than every person who'd ever tried to underestimate me. And they were about to learn exactly how dangerous it is to underestimate Margaret Thompson. The fourth screenshot was a conversation between Richard and someone named James Morrison, not my attorney James Morrison, but apparently a different lawyer who specialized in elder law. Morrison, we'll need to establish a pattern of declining mental capacity. Do you have witnesses? Richard, my wife, my sister-in-law, my daughter. Plus medical documentation from 3 different doctors. Morrison, what about assets? Do you have a complete picture of her holdings? Richard, we're still investigating. She's been very secretive about money, but we know there's at least $4 million in various accounts, plus the house, plus God knows what else. Morrison, secretive how? Richard, she lives like she's poor, drives an old car, shops at discount stores. But somehow she always has money when we need it. Large amounts of money. Morrison, that could actually work in our favor. Hoarding behavior, financial paranoia, classic signs of declining mental capacity. Richard, how long will the process take? Morrison, if we file right after the wedding, we could have her committed within 30 days. Once she's in care, you'll have full access to her accounts. Richard, and if she fights it? Morrison, with what? We'll have medical testimony, family testimony, and documented evidence of her declining condition. She'll be in no position to fight anything. The fifth screenshot was the most damaging of all, a group conversation between Richard, Patricia, Lisa, and Jennifer. Richard, everyone clear on the timeline? Wedding Saturday, file papers Monday, hearing within 2 weeks. Patricia, what about Emma? She might ask questions. Lisa, Emma will be on her honeymoon in Italy. By the time she gets back, it'll be done. Jennifer, what if Grandma hires her own lawyer? Richard, with what money? We'll freeze her accounts as soon as we get guardianship. Patricia, plus, who's going to believe a confused old woman over her concerned family members? Lisa, I actually feel bad about this. She's been so generous over the years. Richard, that's exactly why we need to do this. She's giving away money she should be preserving for her care. We're actually protecting her from her own poor judgment. Jennifer, how do we explain this to Tommy and Emma later? Patricia, we tell them we did what was best for Grandma. They'll understand when they're older. Richard, besides, it's not like we're stealing from her. This money was going to come to us eventually anyway. We're just accelerating the timeline. Lisa, when do we tell her? Richard, we don't. The sheriff will serve her with papers, and we'll be there to support her through the process. Patricia, should we be recording this conversation? Richard, God no. Delete these messages after the wedding. But they hadn't deleted them. Tommy had screenshots of everything, captured from his mother's old phone that she'd given him to use for games, not realizing that her text messages were still syncing to the device. The final item in the envelope was a handwritten timeline in Tommy's careful script. June 10th, Mom called Uncle Richard about the lawyer June 11th, Aunt Patricia met with Dr. Hanson June 12th, Uncle Richard talked to the nursing home June 13th, Jennifer asked about her share of the money June 14th, they decided to file papers on Monday June 15th, Emma's wedding today. Below the timeline, Tommy had written, Grandma, I didn't know what to do. They're my family, but this isn't right. You're the smartest person I know, and you're not crazy. I love you, Tommy. I sat in that bathroom for 20 minutes, reading and rereading the evidence of my family's betrayal. When I finally emerged, I looked exactly the same as when I'd entered, same navy dress, same carefully styled hair, same pleasant grandmother smile. But inside, everything had changed. I was no longer Margaret Thompson, the generous grandmother who quietly subsidized her family's lifestyle while asking for nothing in return. I was Margaret Thompson, the woman who'd built a financial empire from nothing, who'd outmaneuvered competitors twice my size, who'd survived and thrived in a male-dominated industry for 40 years. And I was about to remind my family exactly who they were dealing with. I found Tommy by the dessert table, loading up a plate with wedding cake and chocolate-covered strawberries. He looked up at me with worried eyes, clearly wondering if he'd done the right thing. Tommy, I said quietly, putting my hand on his shoulder, walk with me outside for a minute. We stepped onto the terrace that overlooked the hotel's garden. The evening air was warm and sweet with the scent of jasmine. Inside, the reception continued, music, laughter, celebration. Outside, a grandmother and grandson had a conversation that would change both their lives forever. "How long have you known about this?" I asked. "About 3 weeks," he said, his voice small and uncertain. "I heard Mom on the phone with Uncle Richard. She didn't know I was listening." "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" Tommy looked down at his shoes. "I wasn't sure what to do. They're my family, Grandma. But what they're planning, it's wrong. You're not crazy or confused. You're the smartest person I know. You help everyone with everything. How could they want to lock you up?" I knelt down so I was at eye level with this brave, ethical 12-year-old who'd risked his family's anger to protect me. "Tommy, what you did took incredible courage. You could have stayed quiet, but you chose to do the right thing even though it was hard. Are you going to stop them?" I looked through the terrace windows at my family. Richard was dancing with Emma, playing the proud father figure while secretly planning to betray the woman who'd made his lifestyle possible. Patricia was laughing with some relatives, probably already mentally spending her share of my assets. Lisa was taking pictures with Jennifer, both of them glowing with anticipation of their upcoming windfall. "Tommy," I said, "I'm not just going to stop them. I'm going to teach them a lesson they'll never forget." "What kind of lesson?" "The kind that happens when you underestimate someone who's spent 40 years being underestimated." We went back inside, and I continued playing my role for the rest of the evening. I smiled at congratulations, hugged relatives goodbye, and accepted compliments on Emma's beautiful wedding. Every interaction with my family took on new meaning now that I understood their true motivations. When Richard asked if I was feeling all right because I seemed a little quiet, I realized he was fishing for signs of confusion to document later. When Patricia mentioned that I was wearing the same dress from Uncle David's funeral, she was building a narrative about my supposedly declining memory. When Lisa hugged me goodbye and said she was worried about me living alone in that big house, she was laying groundwork for the competency case. They were all performing for an audience of one me, and they had no idea that I saw right through every manipulative word and gesture. Emma and Brad left for their honeymoon at midnight, and I hugged them both goodbye at the hotel entrance. Emma looked radiant in her going-away outfit, clutching her bouquet and bubbling with excitement about their trip to Italy. "Thank you for everything, Grandma," she whispered in my ear. "This was the most perfect wedding anyone could ask for." "You deserve every happiness, sweetheart," I told her. "Enjoy Italy. And remember that you always have a place in my heart, no matter what happens." She looked at me strangely. "What do you mean, no matter what happens?" "Nothing, dear. Just an old woman being sentimental. Have a wonderful honeymoon." I drove home in my reliable Honda Civic, the car my family thought represented my modest financial circumstances. They had no idea that my real car, a BMW 7 Series, was parked in a garage across town, registered to my consulting company along with several other assets they knew nothing about. My house sat on 2 acres in one of the city's most desirable neighborhoods, though my family had never questioned how a retired bookkeeper could afford such a property. When they asked, I told them Robert's life insurance had been more generous than expected, and they accepted that explanation because it fit their narrative of my financial limitations. Inside, the house was exactly as I'd left it that morning, elegant but not ostentatious, comfortable but not luxurious. I'd decorated it carefully to suggest success without revealing wealth, prosperity without displaying the true extent of my assets. I went to my home office, a room my family rarely entered because they assumed it contained nothing more interesting than household paperwork and old tax returns. In reality, it was the command center for a portfolio worth over $8 million, more than they discovered, thanks to offshore accounts and investment vehicles they couldn't access or trace. I spent that night surrounded by financial documents, legal papers, and strategic plans, preparing for the battle my family didn't know they'd just started. By dawn, I had a comprehensive strategy that would not only protect every penny of my wealth but would expose their betrayal in the most public and humiliating way possible. The first step was gathering additional evidence. Tommy had provided the smoking gun, but I needed to build a complete case that would destroy any possibility of their succeeding with their competency claim. I called my real attorney, James Morrison from Morrison, Blake & Associates, the law firm that had represented my business interests for 20 years. James had helped me structure my trusts, organize my estate planning, and protect my assets from exactly the kind of family greed I was now facing. "Margaret," James said when I reached him on his private line at home, "congratulations on Emma's wedding. I saw some photos on social media. Looked beautiful. Thank you, James. But I'm not calling about the wedding. I need to see you first thing Monday morning. My family is planning to have me declared incompetent so they can steal my money. There was a pause on the other end. Then James chuckled, but without humor. Margaret, I've known you for 2 decades. You're sharper than most attorneys half your age. This should be interesting. What kind of evidence are we dealing with? Screenshots of their text messages planning the whole thing, including bribing doctors to falsify my medical records. Bring everything. We'll meet at 8:30 Monday morning. Next, I called my personal physician, Dr. Elizabeth Warren, not the senator, but a geriatrician who'd been monitoring my health for the past 5 years. Dr. Warren knew my medical history better than anyone and would be able to testify that I showed no signs of mental decline or confusion. Dr. Warren, I said when she answered her personal phone, I need you to document my current mental state as thoroughly as possible. Someone is planning to challenge my competency. Margaret, that's ridiculous. You're one of the sharpest patients I have. Who would question your competency? My family. And they've been bribing other doctors to create false medical records suggesting I'm confused and forgetful. That's not just fraud, that's elder abuse. I'll clear my schedule Monday afternoon for a complete evaluation. We'll document everything. My third call was to my accountant, Harold Kim, who'd managed my business finances for 15 years and knew exactly how I'd accumulated my wealth through legitimate business success rather than luck or inheritance. Harold, I said, I need complete documentation of my business history and asset accumulation. Someone is going to claim I'm too mentally impaired to manage my own finances. That's absurd, Margaret. You built one of the most successful consulting firms in the state. Your financial acumen is beyond question. I know that, and you know that. But I need to prove it to a court if necessary. By Sunday morning, I had appointments scheduled with my attorney, my doctor, and my accountant. I had copies of all my financial records, business documentation, and medical files. I had recorded phone conversations, text message evidence, and witness statements from Tommy. But most importantly, I had a plan that would give my family exactly what they deserved. I spent Sunday in what I called performance mode, playing the role my family expected while secretly preparing their downfall. When Richard called to check on me, I mentioned that I couldn't find my reading glasses, they were sitting on top of my head. When Patricia stopped by with groceries I didn't need, I thanked her profusely and commented on how forgetful I'd been lately. When Lisa called to chat, I told her the same story about my neighbor's cat that I'd mentioned the week before. Each interaction was carefully calculated to give them exactly the kind of evidence they thought they needed, while I secretly recorded every conversation on a digital device James had provided. By Sunday evening, I had hours of audio of my family discussing my declining mental state and their plans for my assets, all while I was demonstrating the kind of strategic thinking that had built my financial empire. Monday morning, I met with James at his law office downtown. Morrison, Blake & Associates occupied 3 floors of a prestigious building, and James's corner office overlooked the city's financial district, a view I'd enjoyed many times over the years when we discussed business matters. Margaret, James said, gesturing to the chair across from his mahogany desk, show me what we're dealing with. I spread out Tommy's screenshots, my recorded conversations, and documentation of the medical fraud Patricia had orchestrated. James reviewed everything carefully, taking notes and occasionally shaking his head in disgust. This is comprehensive elder abuse, he said finally. Financial exploitation, fraud, conspiracy, attempted false imprisonment. We could have them all arrested. I don't want them arrested, I said. I want them exposed. I want everyone who knows our family to see exactly what kind of people they really are. What did you have in mind? I told him my plan. By the time I finished, James was grinning like a predator who'd just spotted wounded prey. Margaret, he said, you're absolutely diabolical. I love it. Can we make it work legally? Not only can we make it work, we can make it airtight. They won't have any recourse whatsoever. Monday afternoon, I met with Dr. Warren for the most comprehensive mental health evaluation of my life. She tested my memory, my reasoning ability, my mathematical skills, my emotional stability, and my capacity for complex decision-making. Margaret, she said when we finished, you're functioning at the cognitive level of someone 20 years younger. Anyone who claims you're mentally impaired is either lying or incompetent. Document everything, I told her. I want a report that's so thorough it would stand up to challenge from any expert in the country. Tuesday, I met with Harold to review 30 years of financial records that proved my business acumen and legitimate wealth accumulation. Margaret, he said, surrounded by folders and documents, your financial management has been exemplary. You built genuine wealth through intelligent business decisions and careful investment strategies. Anyone who suggests you're incapable of managing your own affairs is demonstrably wrong. By Wednesday, I had a legal team, medical documentation, and financial records that would demolish any competency challenge my family might attempt. But more importantly, I had a plan that would turn their greed against them in the most satisfying way possible. Thursday morning, Richard called with artificial concern in his voice. Mom, Patricia and I have been talking, and we're worried about you. You seem confused lately, and living alone in that big house. Oh, Richard, I said, putting a slight tremor in my voice, I've been thinking the same thing. Maybe it is time to start looking at options. Really? I mean, that's great that you're being open to this. What kind of options are you considering? Well, maybe some kind of assisted living situation? Somewhere I could have help but still maintain some independence. That's exactly what we were thinking. In fact, Patricia found a really nice place called Westfield Manor. It's got excellent care, beautiful grounds. Maybe we should all get together to discuss it properly, I suggested. Would this Sunday work? I could make dinner for everyone. Sunday would be perfect. I'll call Lisa and make sure she and the kids can come. What about Emma? She and Brad should be back from their honeymoon. Yes, let's invite them too. This decision affects the whole family. Are you sure you're up to cooking for everyone? We could just order something. No, I insisted. I want to cook. It might be one of the last times I get to make dinner in my own kitchen. The manipulation in my voice would have won an Academy Award. Richard ate up every word. Okay, Mom. We'll all be there Sunday at 6. And Mom? I'm really proud of you for being so mature about this. Friday, I went shopping for ingredients to make everyone's favorite dishes. Not because I wanted to show them love one last time, but because I wanted the setting to be perfect for what I was about to do to them. Saturday, I spent the day cooking and preparing my house for the most important dinner party of my life. I made Richard's favorite pot roast, Patricia's beloved honey-glazed ham, Lisa's green bean casserole, and homemade apple pie for dessert. The house filled with the aromas of family tradition and comfort food. I also made one final call to James to confirm our plan was ready to execute. Everything's in place, he told me. Are you absolutely sure you want to go through with this? James, I said, I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Sunday arrived with perfect weather, warm but not hot, with a gentle breeze that carried the scent of jasmine from my garden. I spent the morning setting the dining room table with my best china, my finest crystal, and the silver flatware that had been a wedding gift 38 years earlier. At 5 o'clock, James arrived with his briefcase and recording equipment. At 5:30, my family began arriving. Richard and Patricia came first, both dressed more formally than usual, Patricia in a navy suit that suggested seriousness and concern, Richard in a dark jacket that made him look appropriately somber for the occasion. Mom, Richard said, kissing my cheek, the house smells amazing. You really went all out. I wanted tonight to be special, I replied. Lisa arrived with Tommy and Jennifer. Lisa looked nervous but determined, Jennifer appeared excited about something she was trying to hide, and Tommy gave me a small, encouraging smile that reminded me why I was doing this. Emma and Brad arrived last, carrying flowers and wine, still glowing from their honeymoon in Italy. Grandma! Emma exclaimed, hugging me tightly. Italy was incredible. We have so many stories to tell you. I can't wait to hear everything, sweetheart. We gathered around my dining room table, the same table where we'd celebrated birthdays and holidays for years, the same table where I'd written checks for their college tuitions and emergency expenses, the same table where they were now expecting to discuss putting me away so they could access my wealth. The irony was perfect. This is absolutely delicious, Mom, Richard said, cutting into his pot roast. You really outdid yourself tonight. Thank you, dear. I wanted this dinner to be memorable. Patricia dabbed her mouth delicately with her napkin. So, Margaret, you mentioned wanting to discuss your living situation? Yes, I said, setting down my fork and looking around the table at their expectant faces. I've been doing a lot of thinking lately about my future and what's best for everyone. We just want you to be safe and comfortable, Lisa said with convincing sincerity. That's so important, Jennifer added. Especially with your memory issues lately. Emma frowned. What memory issues? Grandma seems perfectly fine to me. Well, Patricia said carefully, she has been repeating stories more often, and there have been some concerning incidents. What kind of incidents? Brad asked, his engineering mind clearly wanting specifics. Little things, Richard said dismissively. Forgetting where she put her keys, losing track of conversations, that sort of thing. I lose my keys all the time, Emma protested. That doesn't mean anything. It's different when you're older, sweetheart, Lisa said gently. These things can be early warning signs. I watched this performance with fascination. They were so smooth, so practiced at manipulating the narrative. If I hadn't seen their text messages, I might have believed their concern was genuine. You're probably right, I said with a slight waver in my voice. I have been feeling more confused lately. Sometimes I forget what day it is, or I'll be in the middle of doing something and completely lose track of what I was doing. Tommy shot me a look of alarm, but I gave him a subtle wink. He relaxed slightly, realizing I was performing. The thing is, I continued, I've been managing my own finances for so long, but lately I worry I might make mistakes. Big mistakes. Richard leaned forward, trying to look concerned rather than excited. What kind of mistakes, Mom? Well, I've been thinking about that investment portfolio I mentioned. You know, the one I never really explained properly? I'm worried I might do something foolish with it if my mind continues to slip. The room went very quiet. They were all listening intently now, waiting for me to reveal information they could use. How much are we talking about, Grandma? Jennifer asked with fake casualness. Oh, I'm not really sure. Numbers get so confusing for me now. But I think it's quite a lot. Maybe a few $1 million. Patricia's eyes lit up, but she quickly composed herself. Margaret, that's a substantial amount of money. It's exactly why we're concerned about you managing everything alone. I know, dear. That's why I've been thinking that maybe you're right. Maybe it is time to let someone else handle these complicated financial matters. We're here to help you, Mom, Richard said earnestly. Whatever you need. The thing is, I said, standing up and walking to the sideboard where I'd placed several manila folders, before I make any big decisions, I wanted to review some things with all of you. Important things I should have discussed years ago. I opened the first folder, my hands appearing to tremble slightly. You see, I haven't been entirely honest about my financial situation. What do you mean? Lisa asked. Well, the truth is, I haven't just been lucky with insurance payouts and inheritance money. I've actually been quite successful in business. The table went silent except for the sound of silverware being set down. For the past 30 years, I continued, I've been running a financial consulting company called Thompson Financial Consulting. It started small, just helping neighbors with their investments, but it grew into something much larger. Richard's face was pale. Mom, what are you saying? I'm saying that 3 years ago, I sold that company for $22 million. The silence was deafening. 22 million? Jennifer whispered. Plus the investment portfolio I built over the years, which is currently worth approximately $8.4 million. Patricia's mouth fell open. 8.4 million? I know I should have told you all sooner, but I wanted to see. Well, I wanted to understand how you really felt about me. Whether you loved me for who I am, or whether you loved me for what I could provide. Lisa found her voice first. Mom, this is incredible news. Why didn't you tell us? Because I wanted to test something, I said, opening a second folder. You see, I've been recording our conversations for the past few weeks. All of them. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 20 degrees. Recording us? Richard's voice cracked. Oh yes. And I have to say, the results have been very educational. I pulled out transcripts of their conversations. For instance, Patricia, I have you on tape bribing Dr. Hansen to falsify my medical records. Patricia's face went white. I don't know what you're talking about. $500 cash to document memory concerns that don't exist. That's fraud, Patricia. And elder abuse. Mom, Richard said desperately, if you've been recording us without our knowledge, that might not be legal. Actually, Richard, I checked with my attorney. In this state, only one party needs to consent to recording a conversation. Since I consented to recording my own conversations, everything I captured is perfectly admissible in court. I opened the third folder and began reading from their text messages, the same ones Tommy had shown me but now presented with the authority of someone who'd been planning their downfall for weeks. The lawyer says we can start competency proceedings right after the wedding, I read in Patricia's voice. Cost me $500 to get him to note her confusion, but it's documented now. Patricia looked like she might faint. Even split 4 ways, that's $300K each, I continued, now mimicking Richard's voice. God, I had no idea Mom was sitting on that much money. Richard's face had gone from pale to gray. Once she's in Westfield Manor, we can liquidate everything and divide it properly, I read, looking directly at Lisa. That's why we're all going to document her episodes. Lisa started crying, but they weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of panic. I really need that apartment deposit money, I continued, turning to Jennifer. When do we move forward? Jennifer looked like a trapped animal. Emma was staring at her family in horror. Is this true? Were you really planning to have Grandma committed so you could steal her money? Emma, it's not what it sounds like, Richard tried to explain. We were concerned about her welfare. Bullshit, Emma said, her voice shaking with rage. You were planning to lock up our grandmother so you could steal from her. Emma, language, Patricia said automatically. Language. Emma stood up, her face flushed with fury. You're worried about my language while you're planning to commit fraud and elder abuse? Brad put his hand on Emma's arm. Maybe we should let your grandmother finish. Thank you, Brad, I said calmly. Because there's more. I opened the 4th folder and pulled out legal documents. You see, I've spent the past week meeting with my attorney, my doctor, and my accountant. James, would you like to explain what we discovered? James Morrison stepped out from the kitchen where he'd been waiting with his recording equipment. My family looked shocked to see him, except Tommy, who grinned at the dramatic reveal. Ladies and gentlemen, James said in his crisp attorney voice, I've been Mrs. Thompson's lawyer for 20 years. Over the past week, we've documented that she is in perfect mental health, with cognitive abilities testing in the top 10% for her age group. We've also gathered evidence that several of you have committed elder abuse, fraud, and conspiracy. This is ridiculous, Patricia said, but her voice shook. We're her family. We were trying to help her. Help her by bribing doctors to create false medical records? James asked. Help her by planning to have her forcibly committed to a nursing home? Help her by conspiring to steal her assets? We weren't stealing, Richard protested. That money was going to come to us eventually anyway. Actually, Richard, I said with satisfaction, it wasn't. I opened the final folder and pulled out my will and trust documents. You see, I've been planning my estate for years. Long before I discovered your little conspiracy. My assets are held in irrevocable trusts, and upon my death, the bulk of my wealth goes to various charities. The room was so quiet you could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway. Charities. Lisa whispered. The American Cancer Society, St. Jude's Children's Hospital, Doctors Without Borders, and several local educational foundations. There are provisions for Tommy and Emma's college educations, but that's all. You can't be serious, Jennifer said, her voice rising to a near shriek. We're your family. Family doesn't plot to have their elderly relatives declared incompetent so they can steal their money, I replied coldly. But we've sacrificed so much for you over the years, Patricia said desperately. We've taken care of you, worried about you. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Sacrificed for me? Patricia, I have financial records going back 20 years. Would you like me to read them? Before she could answer, I pulled out another set of documents. Richard, in the past 15 years, I've given you $437,000 in loans and gifts. That includes the down payment for your house, the startup capital for your marketing company, the money to cover your gambling debts, and the bail money when you were arrested for that DUI. Richard looked stricken. How did you know about the gambling? I know about everything, Richard. I've always known. I just chose to help you anyway because I thought you were my son who made mistakes but ultimately loved me. I turned to Patricia. Patricia, I've spent $143,000 on you over the years. Your jewelry, your clothes, your medical procedures, your European vacation. And not once did you thank me genuinely. It was always expected, never appreciated. Patricia was crying now, mascara streaming down her cheeks. Lisa, I continued, turning to my daughter-in-law, since David died, I've given you over $200,000. Your mortgage, your car payments, your credit cards, Jennifer's college expenses. I've been supporting your entire family for 5 years. But I thought that was David's life insurance, Lisa sobbed. David had a $10,000 life insurance policy that barely covered his funeral. Everything else came from me. Everything. I looked at Jennifer, who was sitting frozen in her chair. Jennifer, your graduate school cost $68,000. Your apartment deposit last year was $5,000. Your car repairs were $3,000. Your credit card debt was $12,000. All paid by your supposedly poor, confused grandmother. I didn't know, Jennifer whispered. You didn't know because you never asked. None of you ever asked where the money came from. You just expected it to be there whenever you needed it. Emma was still standing, her face a mix of horror and disgust as she looked at her family. How could you do this to her? She's been taking care of all of us for years, and you wanted to lock her up so you could steal from her. Emma, you don't understand, Richard tried to explain. We were worried about her mental state. Her mental state? Emma's voice was incredulous. Grandma just revealed that she built and sold a multimillion-dollar business while supporting this entire family financially. Does that sound like someone with mental problems to you? Emma's right, Tommy said, speaking up for the first time since dinner started. Grandma's the smartest person I know. You were just being greedy. Lisa turned on her son with fury. You're the one who told her about our plans. I saved her from you, Tommy shot back, showing more courage than most adults twice his age. What you were planning was wrong, and you know it. He's just a child, Patricia said dismissively. He doesn't understand adult responsibilities. Adult responsibilities? I stood up, my voice carrying the authority I developed over 4 decades in business. Let me tell you about adult responsibilities. I walked around the table, looking each of them in the eye as I spoke. Adult responsibility is working 12-hour days for 30 years to build a business from nothing. Adult responsibility is saving and investing wisely so you can help your family when they need it. Adult responsibility is giving freely without expecting gratitude or recognition. I stopped in front of Richard. Adult responsibility is not gambling away money your mother gave you and then lying about needing more for business expenses. I moved to Patricia. Adult responsibility is not spending thousands of dollars on cosmetic surgery while telling people it's for medical reasons. I faced Lisa. Adult responsibility is not living off your mother-in-law's generosity while planning to steal from her. Finally, I looked at Jennifer. And adult responsibility is certainly not participating in a conspiracy to defraud your grandmother while she's paying for your graduate education. The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of Lisa's crying. Here's what's going to happen, I announced, returning to my seat. Effective immediately, all financial support for me stops. No more loans. No more gifts. No more emergency money. No more anything. Mom, please, Richard begged. We have mortgages, obligations. The same mortgages I helped you qualify for? The same obligations I've been helping you meet for years? You should have thought about that before you decided I belonged in a nursing home. What about the house? Patricia asked desperately. You can't just leave it empty. I'm not leaving it empty. I'm selling it and donating the proceeds to charity. You can't do that. Lisa shrieked. This house has been in our family for decades. This house has been in my name for decades, I corrected. And I can do whatever I want with my own property. James stepped forward with another set of documents. I should mention that Mrs. Thompson has also filed restraining orders against all of you, except Emma and Tommy. Any attempt to contact her, visit her property, or interfere with her financial affairs will result in immediate arrest. Restraining orders? Richard's voice was barely a whisper. You plotted to have me kidnapped and imprisoned, I said matter-of-factly. Did you think there wouldn't be consequences? Emma was still standing, tears streaming down her face, but her expression was resolute. Grandma, I want you to know that Brad and I had nothing to do with this. We never would have supported it. I know, sweetheart. That's why you and Tommy are the only ones who will remain in my life. What about our relationship? Richard asked, his voice broken. I'm your son. You were my son. My son would never have plotted to steal from me. My son would never have tried to have me declared mentally incompetent. My son would never have bribed doctors to create false medical records about his own mother. I stood up again and walked to the window that overlooked my garden, the garden I'd tended for 15 years, the garden they'd planned to abandon when they sold my house. You want to know the saddest part of all this? I said without turning around. It was never about the money for me. I gave you everything because I loved you. I supported your dreams, your mistakes, your ambitions because I wanted you to be happy and successful. I turned back to face them. But you never loved me. You loved what I could provide. And when you thought I might become a burden instead of a benefit, you decided to get rid of me. That's not true, Lisa protested. We do love you. Love doesn't plot to commit fraud against the person you claim to love, Lisa. Love doesn't bribe doctors to create false medical records. Love doesn't conspire to steal someone's life savings. Patricia tried one more desperate gambit. Margaret, we can work this out. We can go to family therapy, talk through this misunderstanding. Misunderstanding. My voice was ice cold. You literally discussed having me committed to a nursing home so you could liquidate my assets and divide the proceeds. You planned to sell my house while I was locked away in a facility. You bribed multiple doctors to create fraudulent medical records. What part of that is a misunderstanding? The fight went out of all of them at once. They sat around my dining room table like deflated balloons, the weight of their actions and consequences finally sinking in. I want all of you to leave now, I said. Emma and Tommy, you're welcome to stay as long as you want. The rest of you are no longer welcome in my home. Mom, Richard made one final attempt. 30 years from now, when you're really old and really do need care, who's going to be there for you? We're your family. I looked at this man who'd spent years taking my money while planning to betray me, and I felt nothing but pity. Richard, I'm 62 years old, in perfect health, with enough money to hire the best care available when and if I ever need it. I have friends who respect me, colleagues who admire me, and 2 grandchildren who love me for who I am. I don't need people in my life who see me as nothing more than a source of income. They left, but not gracefully. Patricia screamed at me about being ungrateful and vindictive. Lisa accused me of destroying the family over money. Richard tried to guilt me about abandoning my children in their time of need. Jennifer called me a bitter old woman who would die alone and unloved. Only Emma and Tommy stayed to help me clean up the dinner dishes. Grandma, Emma said as we loaded the dishwasher, I'm so sorry. I had no idea they were planning this. I know, sweetheart. And I'm sorry you had to see your family's true nature like this. Are you really going to cut them off completely? Tommy asked. I thought about it for a moment. Tommy, what do you think I should do? I think you should do whatever makes you happy, he said with the wisdom that seemed far beyond his 12 years. You've spent your whole life taking care of everyone else. Maybe it's time to take care of yourself. That was 8 months ago. I'm writing this from my new penthouse apartment in downtown Seattle, where I moved after selling the house for $1.6 million, more than my family had estimated. The entire proceeds went to establish the Thompson Foundation for Financial Literacy, which provides free financial education to women starting their own businesses. Emma visits regularly with Brad, and we've grown closer than we ever were when the rest of the family was complicating our relationship. She's pregnant with twins now, and I'm going to be a great-grandmother who can actually focus on spoiling my great-grandchildren instead of subsidizing their parents' poor financial decisions. Tommy spends every school vacation with me, and we've taken trips to Europe, Asia, and Australia. He's developing into a remarkable young man with strong ethical principles and genuine empathy for others. I've set up an educational trust that will pay for his college and graduate school, but more importantly, I've taught him that integrity is worth more than any inheritance. As for the rest of my family, I know from Emma that they're struggling financially without my support. Richard's marketing company failed within 6 months, and he's working as a salesman at a car dealership. Patricia had to sell her jewelry collection and now works part-time at a boutique. Lisa moved back in with her parents and is working as a receptionist at a dental office. Jennifer waited tables for 8 months before finding an entry-level position at a public relations firm. Some people might think I'm cruel for cutting them off so completely. But I learned something important at 62. Enabling people's bad behavior isn't kindness, it's just a different form of harm. My former family wanted my money more than they wanted my love. Now they have neither, and I've learned to tell the difference between the two. I'm not the bitter old woman Jennifer predicted. I'm a free woman living exactly the life I choose, surrounded by people who value me for who I am rather than what I can provide. I wake up every morning in my beautiful apartment overlooking Elliott Bay, make coffee on my terrace, and smile knowing that somewhere in the world, Patricia is probably still figuring out how to pay her bills without my subsidies. The red envelope Tommy gave me at Emma's wedding sits framed on my desk as a reminder that sometimes the smallest acts of courage can change everything. It reminds me that real family isn't about blood relations, it's about people who love and protect each other even when it's difficult. And you know what the best part is? Every month, I get updates from the Thompson Foundation about women who are starting successful businesses with the financial education we provide. My money is creating real value in the world instead of enabling the greed and entitlement of people who never appreciated it. Some might call what I did revenge. I call it justice served with a side of financial literacy. And it tastes better than any family dinner I ever cooked.